All right, let's get underway, please. Genesis chapter 43. I've told you that we're going to spend more time in Genesis and Exodus than we will in most of the books in the Hebrew Scriptures because, first of all the 39 books in the Hebrew Scriptures, the first 5 are the most important to them for sure. If you go to Temple Israel or Congregation B'nai Emunah, every Friday night for a whole year, you would hear them read through those first 5 scrolls. Every year, they start over, read through the first 5. Those are definitely the most important. And of the first 5, the most important are the first 2. If you can deal intellectually and faithfully with Genesis and Exodus, you can understand the Hebrew Scriptures. You can deal with the Hebrew Scriptures. Now, we will deal with other books and other passages, but not so much of them as we will Genesis and Exodus. These are the 2 key ones, and so we'll spend whatever time we think is necessary here to help you really grasp the deepest significance of these 2 books. If you're new with us, thank you for joining us. We hope this will be a New Year's resolution of yours to be in our class every week. We'd love to have you here. What we're doing is going through the Bible a third time, but this time we're not doing every verse of every chapter, as we did the first 2 times through. Instead, we're going to deal with the greatest passages, and you're going to trust me that I'm going to lift up the greatest passages. We're looking for the highlights. We're not going to deal with all 150 Psalms. We're going to deal with Psalm 23 and a few others that rise above the average, if you would, those that are most helpful. And those are the passages that we're looking for here. All right, let's pray. God, thank you for this new day and this new year. We look forward. We pray we will not spend too much time looking backward, but that we will look forward and move into this new year, believing with all our hearts that you are offering us new beginnings, and that you will make possible significant changes for good in our lives and in your whole world, to all who are receptive to the workings of your Holy Spirit. We offer our best effort in Christ's name. Amen. Who knows where we get the word January? You know where we get the word January? Roman mythology. The god Janus. The god Janus could look forward and backward at the same time. Remember? He could look forward and backward at the same time. So what better name for the first month of a new year? It's a time to look backward and then to look forward. And at our 6 o'clock service tonight, we try to help you do that. I'll tell you about it if you haven't been to worship yet. But basically, I brought the service along with me here because I'd found it meaningful at our church down in Texas. And I asked Boston Avenue to give it a try, and we're still doing it 30 years later. You're given a little piece of paper, or there'll be one in your bulletin as you pick it up in the foyer tonight. And we encourage you to write on one side something or more than one thing you'd like to leave behind. Really like to leave behind. And then you turn the little page over and you write things you really are hoping and praying will happen in the new year. What's your deepest hope, your deepest dream, your deepest prayer for the new year? And then at the appropriate point in the service, you bring it forward, and we have 2 big clay pots with votive candles burning down in the bottom, and people tending them to be sure that nobody can ever see what you wrote down except God. God will know what you wrote down. And you bring both your past and your future, and you entrust them to God. Okay? That's what Janus, January, are all about. Looking forward and looking backward. But not spending too much time looking backward. You and I are forward-looking people here. All right, we're ready for chapter 43. Let's restate where we are, because I know last Sunday, lots of snow. Some of you didn't make it, or you were out of town for the holidays. So let me just catch you up briefly. Joseph, favored son of Jacob. Old family script is still going on. All the hurt and pain that came into this family because Rebekah chose Jacob, and Isaac chose Esau, and led to all that hurt and pain. Now Jacob's making the same mistake. Out of 12 sons, he's decided he loves 2 more than the other 10 because their mother was his favorite wife, Rachel. And Joseph and Benjamin are those 2 sons. Joseph, the older of those 2. And Jacob had made for Joseph this beautiful coat. We don't know exactly what it looked like. The old King James called it a coat of many colors, and that has stuck. It doesn't really say colors in Hebrew. It's more about big sleeves, a robe with big sleeves. But certainly different from what the other sons had, and they recognized that their brother had a very special robe. And then when he started telling them, these older brothers of his, how he had dreams and they were always bowing down to him in his dreams, you can imagine how popular he was with the 10 older ones. So once when he was sent by his father to check on the 10 older ones who were tending the sheep that had grazed a little farther away, a few more days away, they saw this as their opportunity. We've got him far enough away, nobody can see what's happening. Let's kill him. And then they saw a caravan headed toward Egypt, and they thought, why kill him and get nothing? Why don't we sell him? Sell him as a slave. And that's what they did, and thought they were done with Joseph forever. But of course, Joseph is the one through whom God is going to work to lead His people Israel. And God did not forget Joseph down in Egypt, looked after him, and helped him interpret dreams to 2 of Pharaoh's staff. And later, when Pharaoh started having dreams, one who had survived remembered, Joseph, the guy I saw in prison because, remember, the guy who bought him in Egypt, the one who owned him, had a wife who had eyes for Joseph. And when he refused her advances, she screamed rape. And that's what she did. And Joseph was thrown into prison. When Pharaoh has dreams and his wine steward remembers that Joseph correctly interpreted dreams for him and the baker, he tells Pharaoh, and Joseph is brought, and he interprets Pharaoh's dreams. Your dreams mean 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. So you need somebody who will tax the people 20%, 1 bushel out of 5, 20% tax, store up all this wonderful grain, so that the 7 years following we will have plenty to eat in Egypt. That's what happened. If Joseph knew how to do this, then he's the one Pharaoh put in charge, put his own signet ring on Joseph's hand so that Joseph could stamp official documents and make things happen. Everything went great. But famine swept not only across Egypt, but across the Middle East, around the Mediterranean there, including Canaan, where Jacob and these 11 remaining sons live, and they're out of food. So, go down to Egypt and buy food. And when they get down to Egypt, they don't recognize Joseph. The last time they had seen him, he was a teenage boy. He's all grown up. He's dressing, looking like an Egyptian. He's a big grown-up man, an Egyptian man, 30 years old. And so they don't recognize him. He recognizes them. He speaks to them in Egyptian. An interpreter interprets for them into Hebrew, so he can understand what his brothers are saying. They can't understand what he's saying except as it's interpreted to them. And he sees that they're frightened. They don't know who he is. He says that he's never going to sell them any more grain unless they bring their youngest brother. He's asked, are there others? Well, there's one more. Is still living? Yes, still living. And what about your father? Yeah, our father's still living, and so on. So Joseph gets brought up to date without their knowing that he's getting brought up to date. And he says to them, first of all, I know you're spies. You mean harm to me. I'm going to throw you in jail until the younger brother is sent down. Let one of you go and all the others stay in prison. Well, no, we can't do that. Okay, I'll keep one and all the rest of you go back home, but you're not getting any more grain until you bring the youngest one down. So when they got back home and they told their father what had happened, he said, well, there's no way. No way am I letting Benjamin out of my sight. He is the only one I have left. He says this to 10 other sons. Benjamin's the only one I've got left. He's not leaving me. That's where we left off last Sunday. All right. Chapter 43. Now the famine was severe in the land, and when they, means Jacob and all of his family, had eaten up the grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again, buy us a little more food." But Judah, one of the sons, said to him, "The man solemnly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.' If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us,'" and he's just reiterating to this old man over and over, "You're not listening, God love you. He said, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.'" Israel, remember Jacob's name got changed at the Jabbok River to Israel. Israel said, "Why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother? You never should have told him." They replied, "The men questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, 'Is your father still alive? Have you another brother?' And when what we told him was in answer to these questions." How could we not answer the questions the man was asking us? They were very specific. Could we in any way know that he would say, "Bring your brother down"? I mean, why would he be interested in an 11th brother? Then Judah said to his father Israel, "Send the boy with me and let us be on our way, so that we may live and not die, you and we and also our little ones." They all have sons and daughters. "I myself will be surety for him." That is, I will offer myself for him. You can hold me accountable for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, we would have returned twice by now. In other words, we've been getting hungrier and hungrier. If you had let us go when we first told you we needed to go back with Benjamin, we would have already been there and back twice by this time. Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags and carry them down as a present to the man." Now they're starving to death, but they have a few goodies they can collect: a little balm, a little honey, gum, rosin, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the top of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Remember that Joseph said to his servants, when you are packing the grain for them that they're buying, put their money back in the mouth of every sack and then tie it up so that they do not see it. So when they got back home and started opening the bags, there was their money. He hadn't accepted any money for the grain they had bought. Take your brother also and be on your way again to the man. May God El Shaddai, the Almighty, El Shaddai is what it literally says, grant you mercy before the man so that he may send back your other brother and Benjamin. Now the other brother, of course, was the one Joseph finally agreed, okay, if I keep one of you in prison, the rest of you can go back. So one's been down there all these months in jail, waiting for the brothers to reappear. Latter part of verse 15. Then they went on their way down to Egypt and stood before Joseph again. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, now notice here what's happening. Benjamin is his full brother. Same father and same mother. Rachel, favored wife, birthed only two, Joseph and then Benjamin. She had an unusually difficult time delivering Benjamin, died in childbirth, was buried at a little nowhere place called Bethlehem. Remember? Okay. So Benjamin is his full brother, same father and same mother. And this is going to be really tough seeing him after all these years. Okay. He said to the steward of his house, now he's still speaking in Egyptian, remember. He's not showing his brothers that he knows Hebrew. Bring the men into the house, slaughter an animal. I mean, these are very poor people from Canaan. His staff must have wondered what in the world has gotten into him. Kill an animal for this ragtag group. Make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon. Verse 18, now the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house. They thought nothing good can come of this. And they said, it is because of the money we placed in our sacks the first time that we've been brought in, so that he may have an opportunity to fall upon us, to make slaves of us, and take our donkeys. They said, oh, my Lord, to Joseph, we came down the first time to buy food, and when we came to the lodging place, that is, they had to camp, they couldn't make it home in one day. So when they came to the lodging place on the way home, we opened our sacks, and there was each man's money in the top of his sack, our money in full weight. So we've brought it back with us. Moreover, we've brought down with us additional money to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks. And he replied, rest assured, do not be afraid. And this is a strange statement for an Egyptian to make. Your El and the El of your father must have put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money. Then he brought Simeon, the one he had kept in jail, out to them. And when the steward had brought them into Joseph's house, and what does one do as good host, had given them water, and they had washed their feet. And when he had given their donkeys fodder, they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that they would dine there. Now when Joseph came home, they brought him the present that they had carried into the house, and bowed to the ground before him. He inquired about their welfare and said, is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive? He knows he's getting along in years. They said, your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive. Look at verse 29. And is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son. He says in Egyptian. Being translated, he's not his son, of course, he's his brother. With that, Joseph hurried out. Now notice what a wonderfully told story this is. With that, Joseph hurried out because he was overcome with affection for his brother, and he was about to weep. So he went into a private room and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out, and controlling himself, he said, serve the meal. So they served him by himself. He's at a little elevated place, you can be sure, and them by themselves. Now the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. Now, is this not interesting? The Jews were they who thought nobody was good enough to eat with them. And here the tables are turned. Those who are Joseph's closest associates, those who work under him, would not eat with these Jews, these Israelites, these Habiru, this trash from Canaan. They wouldn't eat with them. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table. Notice, but Benjamin's portion went 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they drank and were merry. Hey, if it makes him happy, make him happy. We just want to go home. Chapter 44. Then he, this time he refers to Joseph, commanded the steward of his house, fill the men's sacks with food as much as they can carry. Now he's saying this in Egyptian, so the brothers don't understand. And put each man's money in the top of his sack, as they had done before. But notice here, the plot thickens. Put my cup, the silver cup, in the top of the sack of the youngest with his money for the grain. And he did as Joseph told him. As soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away with their donkeys. They could go home. When they'd gone only a short distance from the city, Joseph said to his steward, go follow after the men. And when you overtake them, say to them, why have you returned evil for good? Why have you stolen my silver cup? Verse 6. So when Joseph's steward overtook them, he repeated these words to them. They said to him, why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servants that they should do such a thing. Look, the money that we found at the top of our sacks we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. Why then would we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? Should it be found with one of your servants, let him die. Moreover, the rest of us will become my Lord's slaves. Oh boy. They've promised they will get Benjamin back alive no matter what. And now they're saying, if anybody has the silver cup, kill him. It's okay. We didn't take the cup. Verse 11. Then each one quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each opened his sack. He searched. This means now the steward, Joseph's steward. You see, these pronouns are not made clear, are they? You have to sort of follow along. The steward is the one who's searching, of course, beginning with the eldest and ending with the youngest. So they go through 10 bags and everything's okay. And then they get to the 11th. The cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this, they tore their clothes. Remember the sign of grieving in biblical times. Tear your clothes, which is a sign of meaning I'm undone. I'm undone. I remember once when we flew into Athens, Greece, and when we got our bags, there was the guy who was our guide motioning us out to a bus. He looked like he hadn't shaved in 2 or 3 days. His eyes were sort of red and bloodshot and his hair disheveled. And I thought, wow, this is not the kind of guide we usually get. This is not the way we're treated most of the places we've been. And when we got to the hotel and all bags were being taken on to the rooms, this young man said to me, tomorrow morning you will be met by a friend of mine, another guide. I have to bury my father tomorrow. And the next day, the guide said to us, did you notice that your guide yesterday may not have looked like he had shaved and bathed and so on? In Greece, that's the way we show that we're undone by grief. We're undone by grief. And that's why he looked the way he did. I will guide you all day today, and tomorrow he will be back with you, and you will see a different young man. And he was absolutely right. Okay, in the Middle East, tear your clothes. Put ashes on your head to show that you're lower than dirt. You're completely undone by this whole thing. Okay, they tore their clothes, then each one loaded his donkey, as they were being told, and were taken back to the city. Oh no, we're dead. Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house while he was still there, and they fell to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, what deed is this that you have done? And Judah said, what can we say to my Lord? What can we speak? How can we clear ourselves? Now notice that still Joseph is speaking Egyptian. There's a translator there. Only the one, this is in verse 17, only the one in whose possession the cup was found shall be my slave. But as for you, go up in shalom to your father. But of course, that's the worst thing. That's what they had promised their father would not happen. They would not lose Benjamin. And now Joseph is saying, look, all will be forgiven. He's the one that had the silver cup. You'll leave him. All the rest of you can go. But Judah had made this big promise to his father. And he's not hiding from that commitment. He steps right up. Then Judah stepped up to him and said, O my Lord, let your servant please speak a word in my Lord's ears. Do not be angry with your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother, meaning Benjamin's brother, is dead. They thought Joseph was dead. They'd sold him as a slave all those years ago. Surely he's dead by this time. His brother is dead. He alone is left of his mother's children. Remember, his mother, meaning Benjamin's, Rachel, she's dead. If Joseph's dead, then Benjamin's the only one left from her. And his father loves him. Skip down to verse 31. This is where the story really picks up again. When he sees that the boy, Benjamin, is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant, our father, with sorrow to Sheol. Now just remember, Sheol is usually not translated for you and me into English because we don't have one word or even two or three. It basically was a place of dampness and darkness, a tomb. It'll kill him. That's basically what they're saying. It'll kill him. We'll have to bury him. That'll be it. For your servant, Judah's talking about himself, for your servant became surety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I will bear the blame in the sight of my father all my life. Now therefore, please let your servant remain as a slave to my Lord in place of the boy. I will be your servant for the rest of my life. Just please let Benjamin go home. And let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the suffering that would come upon my father. I want you to hear what he's saying. What he's saying is, I should have been responsible. And so I'm willing to offer up myself. How can I go to my father and bring this hurt and pain on him when exactly that is what he did do years ago? He did exactly that to his father. He went home and said to him, look at this bloody coat we've got. Joseph must be dead. And brought years of grieving upon this father. Jacob believes Joseph is dead. In his heart, he's had to bury him. He's had to bury him. And now Judah finally is saying it correctly. How can one son bring that kind of hurt and pain to a father? How can he do that? But that's exactly what he and the others had done, you see, before. That's what they had done. Chapter 45. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him. And he cried out. Okay, he cannot control his emotions. And he cried out, send everyone away from me. So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He wants all Egyptians out of the room. He wept so loudly, Joseph did, that Pharaoh heard it. And the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, now in Hebrew, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brother could not answer him, so dismayed were they at his presence. Oh, no. No. What will he do to us now that we know he is our brother whom we did this horrible thing to so many years ago? But that's not Joseph's feeling. Joseph said to his brothers, come closer to me. And they came closer. He said, I'm your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. And this is where Paul gets his statement to the church at Rome. Finally, all things work together for good to those who love the Lord. Even terribly bad things, God can work through and around finally to bring the better. What these brothers did to Joseph was horrible. But God used it as an opportunity to save that Middle Eastern world when terrible famine came, and specifically to save His faith community, the Israelites. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth. In other words, He made promises to Abraham and Sarah that they would found a new people. And God doesn't go back on His promises. God found a way to save His people, even during this difficult 7 years. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father. Hurry, go up to him in Canaan, and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, El has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. In Hebrew, you must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt and all that you've seen. Hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, while Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. It's a wonderful story. Verse 24. Then Joseph sent his brothers on their way, and as they were leaving, he said to them, do not quarrel along the way. Isn't that a great line? I love that. Do not quarrel. Let there be peace. Surely in this family we've had so much hurt and pain. Do not quarrel. Do not blame each other, you say. So they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they told him, Joseph is still alive. He's even ruler over all the land of Egypt. Jacob was stunned. He could not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph that he'd said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Now notice what the word is, spirit. It's ruach. We know this word. Genesis 1. And God created people. God created humans. Male and female, He created them. Genesis 1 says, He breathed into them ruach. Breathed into them His own breath, wind, spirit. Here's the word. When Jacob had been told that Joseph was dead, the spirit went out of him. You ever seen anybody like that? There was a family in our little church where I grew up. They had 2 daughters and a son. A daughter, then a son, then a second daughter. The father was a big man, probably 6'1", I'd guess, maybe 220 pounds, farmer. One day he was plowing with this younger daughter that he loved better than life. Actually disking. He had the discs on behind. And he turned with the mules at one point, and somehow this little girl dropped off the seat under those discs, and she died. She died before I was born. This man lived another 20 years. When he died, he weighed 120 pounds. And there was nothing physically wrong with him. He didn't eat as he had before. He came to church. We saw him. People spoke to him. He would nod his head. The day that little girl died, the spirit went out of him. It did. It went out of him. And here's this old father now. The spirit of Jacob revived. Israel is Jacob, remember. Israel said, enough! My son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die. So when Israel set out on his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the El of his father Isaac. Now just remind yourself where we're talking about here. They live up in the land of Canaan. Okay, Canaan is modern-day Israel, basically. It's between the Sea of Galilee, which is a freshwater lake, as you know, called the Sea of Galilee. The Jordan River, the Jabbok, flows into it. The Dead Sea at the bottom. Beersheba is down in the Negev desert. It also is a part of Israel today. Israel owns this territory too. So they've been in Canaan, and they're on the way to Egypt down here, and they stop at sort of the last part of their land. At Canaan, the last of Canaan, at Beersheba. I told you our guide Jacob's son and his daughter-in-law decided they would go to Beersheba to live because there's Israel, modern-day Israel, was offering special incentives to those who would go and live in the Negev desert near their border. So Beersheba is still very much there as it was all those years ago. Just a little trading post in the middle of the desert. An oasis. Okay, a watering hole. So Jacob, Israel, I should call him Israel at this point. Israel is about to say goodbye, at least for a time, to the land given to them by God. They believed with all their heart. God gave it to them. Remember the movie Exodus, when the song was, "This land is mine, God gave this land to me." Remember that song? God gave this land to me. They're leaving Canaan to go be with Joseph in Egypt. So, as a closing act here, they offer up sacrifice to God. I lost my place. Yeah, thanks. God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, look what God calls him again. Grabber, here I am. Then he said, I am El. In case you've forgotten, the El of your father, Isaac. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. I mean, this would be really something to go into the very jaws of their enemy. For I will make of you a great nation there. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's own hand shall close your eyes, meaning push the eyelids down. Joseph will tend you when you die. He will be there to close your lids. Okay. Then Jacob set out from Beersheba. You ever moved very much? I never had moved very much. I lived in one little county, different houses, but in the same county down in Texas for 18 years. And really, basically for the next 6 while I was in college and graduate school, as I did all 7 years and 6. My little churches were both in Panola County, the very one in which I'd grown up. So 24 years of my life, I'd lived in one little county in Texas. When we were moved to Houston, that was a long way for us, about 200 miles. I say Gail, and that was Gail and me by this time. And we had 9 years in Houston and then 7 years in Beaumont, 16 years down on the Gulf Coast there. And then I got this call from the Bishop of Oklahoma. That was scary to me. I'd never seen this place. I'd only heard of it. I'd heard good things about this great church, of course, but I'd never seen it. I'd also heard that it had some real financial problems for several years before I got the call. I really was afraid when I got here this beautiful church would have paint hanging from the ceilings. Deferred maintenance. I was afraid. I'd been in Texas all my life. I'd heard that Oklahomans don't like Texans. And I knew Texans didn't like Oklahomans. I didn't know if you would like me or not. I was afraid I would tell you my stories and you wouldn't be impressed or even care. And it was made very clear to me by one of the district superintendents down in Texas. He said, I wish you well. The trains run north. They don't run south. Others, he meant, had moved north. They didn't ever get to come back. One of the men I'd worked for in Houston had gone to First Methodist Church in Wichita, Kansas, and he died in Kansas. Okay. He died in Kansas. One of the most enterprising young ministers in New Orleans, a fast-growing church out near the airport there in New Orleans, was offered the downtown church in Lincoln, Nebraska. He was told, you go there and do 10 great years, you'll be elected a bishop, you'll be somebody important. Well, he still lives in Lincoln, Nebraska, 40 years later. Trains don't run south. So, I was concerned, to say the least. I felt God was leading me to do this. I hoped God was leading me to do this, but I certainly didn't hear anything with my ears. So it was scary. It was scary. I knew this story from Genesis, and I kept praying. Had a whole month before we got to move. A whole month. I don't want to cross the Red River without you. I prayed. I don't want to cross the Red River without you. If this is not where we're supposed to be, help me know. Help me know. It was scary. Okay? So I can feel what Jacob's feeling here. Gee, what if I move my whole family? We moved, and we've reared 2 young men who are Oklahomans. This is their state. This is where they intend to spend the rest of their lives, as far as I know at this point. Certainly it's where Gail and I intend to spend the rest of ours. And our little grandchildren are Oklahomans. 2 of them got born in Alabama, but they came to Oklahoma as soon as they could. Okay. So 2 were born in Birmingham while Trey had a job there. But ever since then, they've all been right here in Oklahoma. But it's scary nonetheless. So can you appreciate at least what's going on in Jacob's heart? In the middle of the night, a dream. God told him he would be with him when he was fleeing from Esau. And God tells him again, I'll be with you. I'll be with you, going down to Egypt. Your own son Joseph will close the lids on your eyes. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. Verse 29. Joseph made ready his chariot. He rides in style. He's the Pharaoh's right-hand man. His father's coming in a wagon. He's riding in a chariot. And he wants to see his father. Chariots are much faster. They're also really impressive. Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet his father Israel in Goshen. He presented himself to him, fell on his neck, and wept on his neck a good while. Israel said to Joseph, I can die now, having seen for myself that you're still alive. Do you know where Goshen was? Goshen was outside what we know today as Cairo. It's a very well-known place in Egypt, Goshen. And scholars are convinced that the great pyramids and other things that have built there were almost sure built by Hebrew labor, slaves. We'll read a little farther, we'll discover they end up staying there 400 years. 400 years they become slaves in Egypt and live in the land of Goshen. Okay, the territory of Goshen. All right, let's go on. Verse 33. Joseph is tutoring them, teaching them here what they're supposed to say next. When Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? What do you folks do? You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth even until now, both we and our ancestors, in order that you may settle in the land of Goshen, because all shepherds are abhorrent to the Egyptians. We're cattlemen. We're cattlemen, because he doesn't like shepherds. Now, when I was preparing my Christmas Eve sermon, a couple of the scholars I was reading said, we today think all shepherds were nice people. But in fact, by the time Jesus lived, shepherds were considered shiftless, sort of worthless, irresponsible folk. But probably the only reason Luke was willing to have these shepherds be the first one to hear the angelic chorus and to come rushing to the stable in Bethlehem was to re-emphasize this is a descendant of David. And David became a great man, having begun as a shepherd boy. The tie is to King David. The tie is to a time when shepherds were considered really wonderful, very responsible people. So much so that the poet would say, the I am who I am is my shepherd. He leads me beside still waters, makes me lie down in green pastures. Remember? Okay, shepherds were looked upon as being very noble people, very caring, self-giving for the animals in the family. But there came a time when they were considered shiftless and sort of worthless and irresponsible. Thieves, who use the darkness of night to steal from others and so on. So we get a little bit of that here in this picture the Egyptians have of shepherds. They don't like them. 47, verse 7. Then Joseph brought in his father Jacob. Notice how it shifts back and forth, sometimes calling him Israel, sometimes calling him Jacob, same person, and presented him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many are the years of your life? How old are you?" "The years of my earthly sojourn are 130. Few and hard have been the years of my life." Verse 11, Joseph settled his father and his brothers and granted them a holding in the land of Egypt, in the best part of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had instructed. And most scholars believe that Moses, when he comes along, is dealing with Ramses II. Ramses II, the Pharaoh with whom Moses has to contend. All right, let's skip on to verse 27 there. Then Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the region of Goshen. Verse 29, when the time of Israel's death drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "If I have found favor with you." Now, isn't that a strange thing for a father to say to a son? If I have found favor with you, if you wish me well, put your hand under my thigh. Now, this is a strange way they had of making covenant somehow. To put your hand under somebody's thigh, but it was generally accepted way of doing things. Almost like shaking of hands today, when you sort of seal the deal by shaking hands. Put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal loyally and truly with me. And what he means is, I want to know you'll do the right thing by me when I die. I don't want to be buried in Egypt. That's the whole point of this. I know I'm really close to dying now, and I want you to promise me you will not bury me here in Egypt. This is not my land. This is not the land promised to Abraham and Sarah, his grandparents. Verse 48. After this, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill." So he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Now, note here that we've already been told, you may recall a couple of weeks ago, that after Joseph was established as Pharaoh's right-hand man, after he had interpreted the dreams for him, as they were going into the 7 really good years that would be followed by 7 terrible ones, he took himself a wife, a daughter of a priest of an Egyptian god. Okay, they were heathen and pagan, not worshippers of Israel's God. Took himself a wife, daughter of a priest. And she had bore two sons to him. So as far as we know, nothing's been said of these two sons to the family until the time now Israel's about to die. Now what we will note as we go along is that there were times in Israel's history when they seemed to be very happy to take in women from other tribes. Moses will end up marrying a Midianite woman. And according to one of the ancient sources, remember I told you J and E we think are scrunched up together, and one says Joseph was sold to Ishmaelites and one to Midianites, and those two names get flipped back and forth. I mean, again and again. Did you hear he was sold to the Midianites? Yes, he was sold to the Ishmaelites, and so on. So the Midianites were those who carted Joseph off to slavery, bought him and sold him to Potiphar. And yet Moses will end up marrying the daughter of a Midianite, Jethro. Okay. So there were times when they took in people from other tribes freely enough. When Naomi and her husband go to Moab in a time of famine, they let their two sons marry Moabite women. Orpah and Ruth, remember. Okay. There are other times when the Israelites feel threatened and their identity threatened, and they say, you can't marry outside our tribe. You cannot marry anybody except another one of us. Okay. This is one of those times when it seems to have been okay. They thought, it's okay. Joseph had no wife. Here he was in Egypt. Who else would you marry but an Egyptian? Verse 8, when Israel saw Joseph's sons, his grandsons, of course, he said, who are these? And Joseph said to his father, they are my sons, whom God has given me here. Be careful, old man. These are my sons, whom God has given me. And he said, Jacob, bring them to me, please, that I may bless them. So Jacob, as it were, agrees to take these little half-blood boys. I mean, they're half Egyptian and half Israelite, and bless them as his own grandchildren. So that's a good step forward. He's not done everything well, but he's beginning to do a few things right just before he dies. Let's move on, chapter 49, verse 29. We're just doing the highlights, remember. So Jacob gives a final statement here. He charges them, saying to them, I'm about to be gathered to my people. And in case Joseph has forgotten, he says, bury me with my ancestors. Verse 31, there Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried, and that's where he wants to be taken. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried, and there I buried Leah. Now Rachel was buried at Bethlehem. You know, they couldn't transport folks in those days. They didn't know how to embalm until they got down to Egypt. So the Jewish practice was you bury on the same day somebody dies. And the Muslims do the same. In Islamic countries, you bury on the day somebody dies. The field and the cave that is in it were purchased from the Hittites. Now when Jacob ended his charge to his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed. The implication is perhaps he's sitting on the side of the bed. Okay. He sits on the side of the bed perhaps and makes this little charge to them. And then he draws his feet up into the bed and breathed his last. Ruach. Gives up his breath, as you would. Okay. And was gathered to his people. So even though we talk about the Jews have not always had a belief in life after this one, other times there are passages that lead us to believe they did have an understanding of life beyond this one. Because Joseph is hundreds of miles, from where the others were buried, and yet he's gathered to his people. Then Joseph threw himself on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Verse 7, so Joseph went up, going north, to bury his father. Verse 14, After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. Everybody came back. Now, realizing that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers said, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us?" You remember Michael Corleone? Michael Corleone grabbed his brother Fredo and said, "Fredo, I know you did this. I know you did this. You betrayed me. It could have cost me my life and that of my children. But you are my brother, and I will not let anyone hurt you so long as our mother lives." And when the mother died, he said to his right-hand men, "It's time to take Fredo fishing. Don't bring him back." Okay. So, these things do happen. They do happen. And Joseph's brothers suddenly realize, oh my, Joseph may have been treating us well to keep Dad feeling that we were all together. What if now he's going to deal with us for selling him into slavery and pays us back in full for all the wrong that we did to him? At least they're owning up to it. And remember, the word forgiveness in German is vergeben, which has to do with giving up one's right to do to another what that one has done to you. They understand he has every right to do something really terrible to us. So they don't want to have to worry forever about this, so they decide to go talk it over. They approach Joseph saying, "Your father gave this instruction before he died." Now they're going to lie about it. There's no indication that Jacob made this speech to them, but listen to what they say. "Say to Joseph, I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you." No indication Jacob ever said that to them. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Verse 19, that's in verse 17. Verse 19, Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good in order to preserve a numerous people as he's doing today. So have no fear. I myself will provide for you and your little ones." In this way he reassured them, speaking kindly to them. Joseph is a good person, isn't he? He's a good person. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Verse 26, and Joseph died, being 110 years old. He's been an Egyptian most of his life, so he was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. Exodus chapter 1, verse 8. Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. That's where we'll start next week. A new king who knows nothing of Joseph and owes him nothing. That'll be the 10th, and we'll be ready for Exodus 1. If you haven't been to church, don't rush off.